And greetings. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast alongside Todd Erz and Aaron McIntyre. I'm Steve Deace here. Day 2 in the new digs brought to you by our friends over at Relief Factor. You might be the next Deborah Ann. Deborah Ann is one of scores of people who over the years have tried the 3-week quick start from Relief Factor. In fact, over 1 million of them have done so. And about 70% of them saw such great results in 3 weeks or less. They stuck with the product long term. Like Deborah Ann, she was suffering long term with chronic pain in her hip. Got started on the Relief Factor supplement regimen. And now she says, I absolutely love how I'm feeling. So, hey, no guarantees here, but 70% odds with a 1 million plus person sample that this is what you're looking for to help reduce the amount of chronic pain and inflammation in your body. Those are pretty good odds, especially when you factor in it's just $20 to see if you don't see a difference in your pain in 3 weeks or less when you go to ReliefFactor.com. That's ReliefFactor.com. Get the 3-week quick start. It's just $20 for ReliefFactor.com. And speaking of $20, you can get $20 off your Blaze TV subscription right now when you go to BlazeTV.com/Deace. So that you can get all the exclusive content we do daily with all of our various shows right here at Blaze TV outside of the censorship industrial complex, which is still in place, just not with the full backing of a White House and the federal government like it was before. But we're still having issues with people contacting me on a regular basis. Had to resubscribe to your Facebook page again. Had to resubscribe to your new YouTube channel again when I know I've already subscribed to these things like 3 times, right? So this is just the misandry that we have to deal with in this business, which is why the best thing is just to get it exclusively from us directly. Plus, you get all kinds of other exclusive content we don't dare post on places like Facebook and YouTube, all right? So go to BlazeTV.com/Deace. Get your subscription today for $20 off with the promo Deace, my last name. Promo code Deace for $20 off. Your subscription works out to just about 26 cents a day. I've got to believe we're worth that. I mean, given the amount of effort the Blaze put into building this studio, I have to believe we're worth 26 cents a day. I have to be. I have to believe that. If not,
I'm not sure. I gave the Blaze a panic attack right before the show. I can't hear you. I had the channel muted.
See?
Maybe I'm not. Maybe Steve is, but I'm not sure.
Maybe we're not worth. Listen, Todd refuses. Just sit here. Suffers on week 2 with back pain. Aaron's got back pain. I think I broke my toe because I dropped my poker table on it last night. Okay. We are a motley crew. Maybe we're not worth 26 cents a day now that I say all that. All right.
Questionable.
BlazeTV.com/Deace. Use the promo code Deace to get $20 off. BlazeTV.com/Deace, promo code Deace. All right, coming up on the show today, I know a lot of people, including the 3 of us, frustrated by the lack of answers on several fronts so far in the first 6 months of the administration. While we're excited about the progress on numerous other fronts, this one has been slower than others. Well, at least one person is attempting to do something about that. He'll join us at the bottom of the hour. Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson will be here. You'll want to stay tuned for that conversation. Next hour, we're going to walk through my 6-month grades on multiple fronts and why I chose these fronts for now. And if we did this 6 months from now, I might have different metrics, different standards of why I would measure them. But we're going to walk through how I would grade this White House 6 months into Trump version 2.0. And Todd and Aaron are going to decide whether or not they think that is fake news or not. And then for Pop Culture Tuesday, we're going to take a look at how the culture, both right and left, has responded to Superman. And there'll be some spoilers. That's why I wanted to wait another week to see both the box office and also avoid as many spoilers as possible. So we'll get into the worldview of the film as well. All that and more coming your way right after Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by crack.
The only difference between crack cocaine and cocaine is sodium bicarbonate and water and heat, literally. That's it.
And those things are pretty much free if you go to like a science store.
This is free. You can go to your neighborhood convenience store and just get. Anyway, I don't want to tell people how to make crack cocaine, but it literally is a mayonnaise jar, cocaine, and baking soda. Does crack cocaine make you act any differently? No. Is it safer than alcohol? Probably.
We'll hear more from Hunter Biden later, but first, the Department of Justice announced this morning an imminent meeting with Jeffrey Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche said in a statement, quote, "In the recent thorough review of the files maintained by the FBI in the Epstein case, no evidence was uncovered that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. He went on to say, quote, "At the direction of Attorney General Bondi, I have communicated with counsel for Miss Maxwell to determine whether she would be willing to speak with prosecutors from the department. Until now, no administration on behalf of the department has inquired about her willingness to meet with the government. That changes now," end quote. Hunter Biden, your thoughts?
People think of crack as being dirty. It's the exact opposite. When you make crack, what you're doing is you're burning off all the impurities so that it combines with the sodium bicarbonate, which makes it smokable. That's all.
U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee has clarified that settlers did not commit arson on a Christian church in Gaza, but reiterated harassment from settlers against Christians needs to stop. He also announced the countries have come to an agreement over visas for evangelical Christians traveling to Israel for various purposes. Hunter Biden, your thoughts?
I know exactly what happened in that debate. He flew around the world, basically, the mileage that he could have flown around the world 3 times.
Yeah.
He's 81 years old. He's tired as They give him Ambien to be able to sleep. He gets up on the stage, and he looks like he's a deer in the headlights.
Longtime Democrat insider Rahm Emanuel wants you to know he's an outsider. Here he is with Megyn Kelly.
Can a man become a woman?
Can a man become a woman? No.
Thank you.
No.
That's so easy. Why don't more people in your party just say that?
Because I'm now going to go into a witness protection plan.
Hunter Biden, your thoughts?
Him, and everybody around him. George Clooney is not a actor. He is a I don't know what he is. He's a brand. And by the way, and God bless him, what right do you have to step on a man who's given 52 years of his life to the service of this country and decide that you, George Clooney, are going to take out basically a full-page ad in the New York Times to me and James Carville, who hasn't run a race in 40 years, and David Axelrod, who had one success in his political life, and that was Barack Obama. And that was because of Barack Obama, not because of David Axelrod.
World Economic Forum founder Klaus Schwab is reportedly tussling with his own board. Schwab abruptly stepped down earlier this year over allegations he misappropriated organization funds. Now it's being reported Schwab is accusing his board of breaching confidentiality by leaking that aforementioned report to media. It's a pretty serious allegation. Hunter Biden, your thoughts?
And David Plouffe and all of these guys and the Pod Save America guys who were junior speechwriters on Barack Obama's Senate staff, who have been dining out on the relationship with him for years, making millions of dollars. The Anita Dunns of the world, who's made $40-50 million off the Democratic Party. They're all going to insert their judgment over a man. Who's Jake Tapper's audience? Jake Tapper?
My mom or something? I don't know.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
For real, though. I don't even think it's your mom anymore.
Democrat Congresswoman Yvette Clark says the other quiet part out loud on immigration.
I'm from Brooklyn, New York. We have a diaspora that can absorb a significant number of these migrants. And when I hear colleagues talk about, the doors of the inn being closed, no room in the inn, I'm saying, I need more people in my district just for redistricting purposes.
Hunter Biden, your thoughts?
All these Democrats say, you have to talk about and realize that people are really upset about illegal immigration. You. How do you think your hotel room gets cleaned? How do you think you got food on your table? Who do you think washes your dishes? Who do you think does your garden? Who do you think is here by the sheer just grit and will that they figured out a way to get here because they thought that they could give themselves and their family a better chance? And he's somehow convinced all of us that these people are the criminals?
Stephen Colbert has a message for President Trump after the Late Show host was canned by CBS.
Would an untalented man be able to compose the following satirical witticism? Go yourself.
Jon Stewart has a message for CBS after Colbert was canned by the network.
Yourself. Just go yourself.
Learning Chinese today. Today's phrase is charming people, one and all.
每个人都是迷人的人.
And that's what happened while we were away.
Yowza. Aaron. Brother. Sometimes in the recording studio, you just know. I think that's a #1 hit. Aaron, that montage, my friend, was magnum opus. That was insane.
You know how many times I've thought after one of his montages that if we could just do one thing that's not a show, 5 minutes, make every American watch.
Mm-hmm.
You just saw it.
I mean, indeed. I mean, there are so many places to go with that. We'll get to as many of them as we possibly can. And then in the overtime today, if you're a Blaze TV subscriber with promo code Deace, you can watch that later today. We'll figure out what is still left from that montage we have to discuss, and we will get to it at blazetv.com/Deace. Aaron's montage brought to you by our friends over at Patriot Mobile. I realize, hey, there are many choices when it comes to whom you can choose for your mobile phone service. There's new ones popping up all the time. Here's the truth. There's only one that has been on the cutting edge of the parallel economy while standing in the gap for every American that believes that freedom is worth fighting for. And that one, our friends over at Patriot Mobile, not only are they leading the way in that parallel red economy, but Patriot Mobile also outgains the competition when it comes to tech. They're the only carriers with access to all 3 major U.S. network. That means exceptional network and nationwide coverage, along with the ability to have multiple numbers on different networks on a single smartphone, in fact. So, folks, this is a game changer. They also offer unlimited data plans, mobile hotspots, international roaming, internet backup, and so much more. Switching easier than ever. Activate in minutes from the comfort of your home. Keep your number, switch your number, keep your phone, upgrade, whatever you want to do. It doesn't take much time to make the switch, but make that time today. It'll be worth it when you go to patriotmobile.com/Steve. That's patriotmobile.com/Steve, or call 972-PATRIOT. Either way, use the promo code Steve. They'll get you started as well with a free month of service. patriotmobile.com/Steve. Promo code Steve to get started with the free month of service today from Patriot Mobile. So, I think what you're seeing there, and remember that people view issues and politicians like they do a menu at a restaurant, right? For every person who doesn't necessarily enjoy what is on the menu, and therefore gets up and walks out thinking there's got to be a better restaurant than this, it's probably 100 to 1, 500 to 1, the amount of people who decide, well, I mean, we're already here. Let's just, the thing we think looks the best or is the least offensive, and let's just order that. That's the way politics works. So for every person, and at times in my career, I've been the person like, this is just so dumb and terrible. I'm out. I cannot take part in it. Okay. But for every person, that's why, I voted Constitution Party once, and, I did that along with 0.005% of the rest of the population. Okay. So for every person that will leave the restaurant, if there's nothing on the menu they like, overwhelmingly the amount of people will say, now that we're here, we might as well choose based on what's on the menu. Okay. And there are some ominous signs for our side right now as we get into quarter number 2. Right? The economy is not really responding as swiftly as they had hoped, and that's where you can see Trump's great frustration with Jerome Powell and the Fed. Why? Well, because he's looking for liquidity in the economy, where people have spending power again. Amazon just had, I think, the worst Prime days that they've had since like 08, 09. So we've got. I know Todd doesn't want to hear this, but like the Christmas, we're 1 quarter away from people starting a lot of Christmas shopping and seeing a lot of that in the stores in the third quarter. Okay. So, or at the end of the third quarter. I mean, there's Christmas and July stuff going on right now as we speak. And there are some signs, and with all that wealth that people are sitting on in their homes, home values have skyrocketed, but it's hard to necessarily find a buyer. That's a story that you guys can, tell that tale at the Erzin household, and so many people in this audience can. So you guys, there's so many people are just sitting on all kinds of equity, but they can't find a buyer for their home with the current interest rates, right? I mean, our oldest daughter and her husband are paying a mortgage payment for a good first-time starter home in a beautiful exurb of Des Moines called Pella, which is absolutely one of the most beautiful communities in our state, okay? And they're paying about as much for that per month in a mortgage payment as we're paying for a 3,000 square foot house in one of the most desirable suburbs in the city of Des Moines, okay? Why? Well, because we got a mortgage rate at 2.8%, okay? And theirs is not that, all right? Because they just got it last year, all right? It's a lot more than that. So all kinds of people are lacking spending power right now because they're sitting on a considerable amount of wealth on their homes, and they cannot find a buyer, mainly because of the rates. So Trump has been losing it over Powell not lowering the rates to try to reignite that housing market, get that liquidity going, get people buying and selling homes, walking away with equity checks, going to Home Depot and Lowe's more often, the mall more often, okay? And a lot of that money is just sitting there. It's not circulating in our economy. It's not increasing our purchasing power. It's just sitting there on all these homes and all these really nice suburbs throughout the course of the country. So there was a poll out yesterday. YouGov had a poll. And hey, it's young men. They can be fickle, all right? But YouGov had a poll that Trump had a 45-point swing loss with young men from February, which you could probably say it's over military engagement in Israel and giving arms to Ukraine and Epstein. Now, again, we're not voting today, all right? So to me, I wouldn't sit here and break this poll down, even if it's wrong. Let's say it's wrong by, half. That, even a 10 or 15-point swing would be, But anecdotally, you're kind of seeing, if you're watching what's going on with the bro dude stuff, Rogan's complaining, Theo Von is kind of complaining, Andrew Schultz is really complaining. I mean, these guys were, on the wing assisting Trump's, game-winning goal to win the election last time, right? And that's where a lot of young men go for their news and information. So there are some things simmering underneath the surface on our side that would make you concerned about, hey, we need to kind of maybe fix a few things, adjust course for those midterms next year. But remember, people look at things in comparison. And that montage with really very little thumb on the scale is really indicative of where it's really indicative of the corner the modern Democratic Party kind of finds itself in right now. And to me, the money shot of that entire montage, and believe me, that is a montage of money shots and rim shots, okay? But the money shot is Rahm Emanuel saying, I have to go, I told you the truth, and we all know this, but for saying it, I have to go into witness protection now. That should tell you right there. Who's Rahm Emanuel? The guy who came up with the saying, never let a good crisis go to waste. One of the chief operatives of the Obama era. All right. That should tell you the predicament that they are in as a party. And it's remember when Gavin Newsom tried to broach the subject of sanity with Charlie Kirk at the beginning of the year and what happened to him.
Nearly started a civil war.
Yes, indeed. Okay. And so it is a political party that is given over to the spirit of the age. Now, listen, if we can't provide more liquidity in the economy by this time next year, when much of the environment is going to be set for the midterm elections, we may very well be in trouble in those midterms. But the majority of normies are going to give us a lot of rope, a lot of margin. I didn't say an endless amount of rope. I didn't say an endless amount of margin. I didn't say that there was no level of performance that we could do that they wouldn't just say, all right, you guys just failed us again. You didn't keep your promises again. So out of here. You're going to lose 40 House seats. But the amount of rope and margin that they are going to give us, I believe, we've not even approached that yet because of what the alternative is. That can be good. That can be bad. That can also mean, by the way, it can mean you have a harder time motivating Republicans to keep their promises because they feel like they can just kind of coast. But much of what's in there is insane. It is possible one of the most powerful men in America in the last few months of the Biden presidency was Hunter Biden. He was omnipresent in the Biden White House at the end. And here are my finer thoughts on producing and manufacturing crack cocaine. And then let me just go scorched earth on basically the Democratic Party and several of its major luminaries. You guys probably don't know what Pod Save America is. It's basically the Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, Glenn Beck of left-wing podcasting. It's one of their biggest brands, maybe their biggest brand on their side. And dude is just dropping trow and defecating all over them. And just settling scores. They're so cornered from a messaging standpoint, they now have to say things like, well, I mean, we need illegal aliens to vote here. I mean, just a year ago, that doesn't happen. That's a fake news story. We have laws that prevent that. Now they're so cornered that they just have to admit, I mean, listen, we've had the term that she used, by the way, diaspora. Yeah, that's a biblical term. When God judges the Jews in the Old Testament, it's a term that means disperse. There's a couple of diasporas. The most famous one, or infamous one, after the Jews go down to the valley of Tophet, which is a Hebrew term for hell, and cast their babies into the fire for the demon Moloch. Nebuchadnezzar invades as God's the buckle of God's daddy's belt, basically, and there's a mass diaspora, or diaspora, sometimes it's pronounced, of the Jewish people for the next 70 years. Okay, to use that term, I mean,
it's like the White Witch rolling in with Aslan's mane.
Yes, yeah. It just goes to show you again, worldview is destiny. And here's the thing. We could actually find clips of Obama saying many similar things. But his charisma caused people to not necessarily translate literally the words coming out of his mouth, but go with a vibe instead. I remember at one of our old churches, the pastor had me come in and wanted me to do kind of a seminar with their elders, because it was an older church and I was one of the younger guys coming in at the time. And he wanted them to get familiar with how, this was streaming hadn't started yet. This is 2008, 2009, somewhere in there. All right. So this is really the earliest era now of MySpace is still a thing. This is the earliest era now that the internet is no longer now a fad, but it is going to be a mainstay in how we communicate moving forward. And just generationally, they were older, and he kind of wanted me to kind of give them some tips on how that works. Okay. So I brought them in on a Sunday night, and this is before Rob Bell had gone full heretic. He had not released Love Wins yet. That would actually come like a year or so later. But people are already beginning to smell a rat where he was concerned, okay, in his Numa videos. And I remember the one that set me off is when he did a video about Peter walking on the water. And he somehow made it about that Peter fell into the water not just because he lost sight of Christ and it weakened his faith, but that he forgot that Jesus has faith in us. And I'm like, literally, hell no, we're not doing that here, because I knew what that meant. Okay. It meant all the stuff that Rob Bell was going to go on and say and write later on, right? And so I took a video that had gone viral with him at the time, and he was doing an event with the Dalai Lama and Oprah Winfrey, an interfaith dialogue. And I took the video and I just showed a 10-minute clip to the elder board at our church at the time. These guys are all seasoned saints, know the word of God, man. Okay. This would have been like John MacArthur's, have you seen that Babylon Bee headline? John MacArthur walks Peter through the Bible when he gets to heaven. Have you seen that? All right. First thing John MacArthur does when he gets to the pearly gates is walk Peter through parts of the Bible he doesn't understand. Okay. So this would have been like John MacArthur's, base audience. Okay. And I just showed them the video with no commentary, say, hey, I want you guys to watch this. And the oozing of empathy and emotion, even for these seasoned saints. And I just sat back and watched for 10 minutes. I could tell by their body language, man, they were into it. They were buying into it. They were connecting with this. I'm like, okay, hey, we're going to take a quick break, 15-minute break, cool, And I came back, I had a printout of the transcript of everything they had just watched. And I read the words without the presentation, without the, shall we call it, toxic empathy oozing forth from the pores, without the emotional manipulation or blackmail. And I just read the words. And you should have seen the looks on these men's faces. I mean, it was like, why are you, speaking such, fork-tongued heresy in our church? Why did Pastor Bob think it was such a good idea for you to come in here and help to, to equip us and to coach us for the future? Okay. And after I got done, I said, that was a transcript of the video you guys just watched 20 minutes ago. Removed, minus all the charisma, charm, minus all the emotion, manipulation, and blackmail. minus all the fake empathy, minus all of that. Here's just actually what was said. And they had a completely different take on it. That is a metaphor for where the Democratic Party stands. If it doesn't have a Bill Clinton level figure or a Barack Obama level figure, and we just go by the transcript of what they mean and what they want, they have a very tough time. Now think about this, given the amount of ground we have lost in this culture, given the amount of institutions that they have captured to impose their narrative. I was reading just yesterday, RFK. Remember everybody was like flummoxed. How'd this Moderna vax get passed? You guys see, and we were like all losing me too. We're all losing our minds about it. Well, apparently the FDA commissioners ran this through while RFK Jr. was on vacation. Didn't know anything about it. And he came back and like fired 2 of them and replaced like his own chief of staff over this. All right, so that's the level of institution capture that we are dealing with here. And yet, despite a diminished church, despite diminished intellect, despite the lack of critical thinking en masse in our culture, despite the amount of institutions they have captured, still consider that if we just take the transcript or we divorce what they believe and think from a charismatic figure and just show it to you as a main line, how difficult of a time they have selling this to the American people. Now imagine what would happen if we were, in terms of worldview and in terms of discipleship, where we were a couple generations ago. Well, we'd be where we were a couple generations ago. To even say these things out loud or present them in a setting would probably cause you to be banished into the intellectual ghettos of America. And tenure, we don't know what that is, and you're exempted from it. Thanks. I mean, you can really see there, you can also see why they have to make everything about Trump. Trump said this, Trump did that. Because to present this stuff on its merits, illegal aliens are going to vote, replace you at the polls. We don't know what a woman is, and to say so out loud causes me to actually have to get into the witness protection program within my own party. The president's son, who got a pardon and acted as a de facto chief of staff in the White House for the last few months of the U.S. presidency, has thoughts on the finer points of manufacturing crack that he's eager to share. In fact, eager to share. To be honest with you, I'm kind of getting to the point that it almost feels like there's like not an excuse to ever lose to these guys. Like we have to like try to lose. Maybe be like, I don't know, like a surrender caucus or something like that. I give Republicans 8 years of excuses with Bill Clinton and Barack Obama as their proxies, but losing to anybody else other than that, there's just frankly, it's inexcusable. How that is sold to people. It's a tough sell even in our current cultural predicament. But that's also, I think, why we've got to be aggressive and seize the moment that we have right now. Because they're not going to be without that kind of a figure forever. A year from now, that could change. Or 2 years from now, or 4 years from now, or 10 years from now. That's why I think we have to take advantage of the moment as it stands right now. What do you guys think, real quick?
Man, I think you really pointed to the paradox in this. Yeah, we shouldn't lose to these guys anytime in the near future, but simultaneously, you as you mentioned, the only reason they exist this way at all versus a couple generations ago is because we opened the door for it in our equivocations, our pulling punches, our getting too comfortable. So that's the paradox, and we have to. That's why we have to capitalize on this moment. It's almost as if, even though it doesn't seem we can lose, destiny is that we will.
You know what's more nuts than saying a man can become a woman? Saying that you have to go into witness protection in your own political party for saying that a man cannot become a woman.
Yeah. That'll preach right there. Senator Ron Johnson's going to join us next. Stay tuned. He has been really one of the bravest public officials we've had over the last few extraordinary years between scamdemics and scandals and gaslights and lies. So I know a lot of you, our show included, have been at least a tad frustrated at times over the slow pace of getting some exposure and transparency on some of the stories we were lied to and gaslit about over the last 5 years. So we thought we'd go to a guy who's been a leader and is trying to do something about getting us that transparency and that information we're seeking right now. That's Senator Ron Johnson here on the show again. And Ron, it's good to have you back on the program. And thanks for joining us here today on The Blaze. How are you?
I'm doing well. Hope you are too.
Thank you very much. So let's start there because you're on the inside of this. You're holding hearings. We're going to get to what you have been able to uncover and where you think this may go in the future in a moment. But can you just kind of speak to our audience a little bit? Because there is some frustration within our base, a lot of excitement about where things have trended on a lot of other directions. But there's a sense that, we should know more about things like the math club shooter and how he got so close to the president last July 13th and things of that nature. Do you think that the concern within our base is justified? As you have sought some answers, through the committee hearing process, have you been okay with the level of transparency at some of these institutions that you've been granted, or are you frustrated as well?
No, when it comes to the assassination attempts, an awful lot of what we do know, my investigatory staff, just by calling local law enforcement shortly after Butler, we were able to develop a pretty detailed timeline. We published a preliminary report, pretty well laid out all the failures of the security plan of the Secret Service in Butler. And then, within 2 weeks, the FBI pretty well took over the investigation and everybody clammed up. Tried to work with other offices. It would have been nice if we could have done a thorough bipartisan investigation, but very slow moving. We were able to talk to maybe a couple of dozen Secret Service agents, not even some of the key ones, as the FBI was interviewing hundreds, never turned over their notes for those interviews, their 302s. I assumed when President Trump won election that he'd be appointing people that would dig into this, investigate it, and release that to the public. We've obviously been involved in the One Big Beautiful Bill and many other priorities. And again, kind of lost track of time, moved so fast. And all of a sudden here, the 1 year anniversary is upon us and nothing's really been released. So I issued what I consider a friendly subpoena to Kash Patel, just basically reminding him, hey, the public has a right to know what happened in Butler. They have a right to know what happened, in West Palm Beach there in terms of the second assassination attempt, who these people are, what the FBI knows, things like, the geolocation of Crook's phone. We'd heard some things about that, never found out anything further about it. The FTA, or the Federal Firearms, whatever you call the agency, ATF, they had somebody on the ground there in Butler. They clammed up about that. So again, there are an awful lot of unanswered questions here that deserve answers.
All right, let's take these stories then one at a time. A lot of our audience is like, how is it that I know more about a company I did not even know existed a week ago and their CEO with his side piece on a kiss cam at a sporting event? And I already know more about this guy than I know about Thomas Matthew Crooks, who got within 150 yards of shooting the president successfully with an assassination attempt right to his face. And we've seen videos where he is literally crawling around on the roof. How he was not spotted just mystifies people. People are mystified at how they were able to take him out at about 450 yards away, if my memory serves, which means they had some form of extended perimeter, yet he was permitted to penetrate that perimeter to get within 150 yards, even shots, even to get them off, right? So people are like, how do I know more about that guy with the kiss cam than I do a guy that nearly altered the course of American history, forever? Is that a fair characterization or question for people in our audience to be asking?
I think so. I think the answer is somewhat obvious from a standpoint of what the mainstream media is interested in. And they're not interested in getting the bottom of who these people were that tried to take out President Trump, but they're highly interested in the salacious videos of a celebrity cam, I guess. Again, it's baffling to me that the administration, again, I understand the challenge that Kash Patel and Pam Bondi have. I mean, they had a lot of lawyers in DOJ who simply couldn't serve Trump administration. They had to terminate a number of that were highly partisan. And based on the lawfare, for example, with Judge Troops in Wisconsin, a high integrity judge, a lawyer from Wisconsin that represented Trump, they're trying to destroy this guy. So I understand the reluctance of other attorneys that really don't want to have their lives destroyed by just serving the Trump Department of Justice. So I'm highly sympathetic with how difficult it is to extract information from the deep state and how difficult it is for Trump appointees to gain control over these agencies, which are out of control. They look at, particularly Republican president, this too shall pass. We can wait him out, or we can even sabotage his policy prescriptions. It's not exactly what they do. The Democrats are generally on board with all the wacky things that the Democrat president wants to do. So again, I understand the challenges, but all that being said, I would still think this would be a top priority of President Trump and his administration to get to the bottom of the assassination attempt and make everything they found out public. And understand, the FBI has far greater investigatory resources than a member of Congress. As ranking member of permanent subcommittee investigations, I had 5 investigators, 5. So it's all that we had for a budget, 5 to, investigate what the entire federal government of millions of employees. So, we are understaffed. We've allowed our constitutional oversight investigatory capabilities to atrophy over the years. The administrations understand that, so they pretty well give a middle finger to congressional inquiries.
You mentioned the second assassination attempt, a question a lot of people have. How is it possible that he, first of all, given that we had just had one in a couple weeks prior, how was he literally the president? Why was he not being protected with, I guess we don't know if there's gold in Fort Knox. I was going to say Fort Knox level of security. And how did that shooter somehow, this was not on his public schedule, how was he able to ascertain on a day off where he would be privately spending his time on a Sunday afternoon to get that close for another potential assassination attempt? That's another question. And again, as you know, Senator, I mean, the audiences like ours is the most loyal base, MAGA base in the country. And so this isn't just, nobody's asking these questions. These are people that are very emotionally, philosophically, morally, spiritually invested in this cause. And they have questions like, how did that guy know his private schedule to know he was even going to be there on a Sunday and get so close to him after the previous assassination attempt?
Yeah, and both these were spectacular security failures. I mean, spectacular, jaw-dropping. I mean, for example, the one in West Palm Beach, he enters the foliage, the cover next to the golf course on a straightaway where you could have had cameras set up monitoring 24/7, motion activated, where this should have been monitored prior to the president stepping on the golf course for at least 24 hours, if not longer than that. I mean, again, this would not be hard with very limited resources to monitor this and not prevent this guy ever gaining access without being noticed. So that's why the American public deserves the answers on these things. Above and beyond that, then who were these people? What did federal law enforcement or our intelligence agencies know about these people? They've just clammed up. We can't get that information. I wish I had explanations. I don't.
I know you're trying to get explanations on whatever the last 4 years of Joe Biden's cognitive decline masquerading as a presidency was. And I happen to believe that, especially what we saw in the last year and a half, that if he were part of a group trying to take over like a Fortune 500 company, a publicly traded corporation, and the opposing ownership group or the existing ownership group walked him into court and said, hey, this guy's a mental incompetent, I think that they'd probably win. And yet he was president of the United States for the last 4 years, maybe ceremoniously only. I know you're digging into that right now. What have you found so far about how many people were invested in perpetuating this lie?
Well, I'm taking a slightly different approach. I don't like to duplicate effort, and I know that James Comer on the House side is trying to figure out the whole auto pen issue, as is the Department of Justice. They've obtained documents from the National Archives. We requested those same documents. I don't want to interfere with the Department of Justice investigation, but that's one track. What I'm trying to do is we just requested, for the time being, voluntary interviews from all the constitutional officers, the cabinet officials, former chiefs of staff, including the Vice President Kamala Harris. again, we're requesting voluntary interviews. We've interviewed one person. It seems like the rest of these cabinet officials are on vacation for the summer. But I'd like to do it voluntarily. I want to take my time. I want to be thorough. My objective is to really create the historical record of what people knew and when they knew it. You're seeing on the House side what's happening is they're calling in probably the key people who really knew what was pulling off, and they're just claiming the fifth. Mm-hmm. You've got President Biden pretty well set up to confirm that, I approved all of those pardons. Barring somebody challenging that or a whistleblower, I don't know how you can disprove that. So again, I'm just trying to create the historical record primarily for future cabinet officials, future vice presidents who take the oath of office to uphold and defend the Constitution. Well, part of the Constitution is the 25th Amendment. It is their duty, their responsibility, if they see a president incapable of carrying out the onerous duties of the president, office of the presidency, they've got to say something. They've got to act. And I think by laying out the historical record, maybe that will give future cabinet officials put in that position, hopefully nobody ever is put in that position again, to act, because we simply cannot afford to have a president of the United States that cannot carry out those duties. And we sure don't want people unelected carrying out those duties instead.
I'm sure you saw the interview that went viral yesterday with the president's son, Hunter Biden. And one of the things he said in his interview is that the president was being given Ambien. Does that show up in any of his medical records whatsoever that were released to the public? Was that ever publicly disclosed at all?
Not that I'm aware of.
I mean, doesn't that beg some further follow-up questions than what else was not disclosed?
Yeah, again, there are all kinds of questions. Fortunately, our nation survived the Biden presidency. Now, we didn't survive in very good shape. I mean, the enormous messes Biden and the Democrats left for us, the open border, the raging wars, the aftermaths of 40-year high inflation, the massive deficit spending averaging $1.9 trillion. I mean, the damage done by the Biden administration and Democrats in control of Congress is profound. And we're going to be digging out of that hole, trying to clean up those enormous messes for quite some time. So again, I understand the historical significance of getting to the bottom of these things, but right now we're more concentrating on cleaning up those messes.
Final thing I want to ask you about, you had a recent panel on voices of the vaccine injured. I'm not sure, I don't know if you saw the story that last week while he was on vacation, Secretary of HHS RFK Jr. was on vacation. Moderna got full approval from the FDA out of nowhere for another COVID jab, mRNA jab for kids. And this was done basically from what Robert Malone is saying, who's on one of the panels now over at CDC at the behest of Secretary Kennedy. This was essentially done in the dead of night with RFK on vacation. He returned, fired two prominent people at FDA, including his own chief of staff. Just another indication of how deeply captured many of these institutions are. So you have been on the cutting edge of giving these people a voice. I mean, frankly, you're the only public official that has told me things about COVID and the extent of its damage and the vaccine that I didn't already know, right? So are you satisfied with the recompense these people are being granted, the change in policy and direction, or at least the attempted pace that we're doing with those things so that nothing like this ever happens again?
No, I'm not. I'm highly sympathetic with the position that RFK Jr. is in. Again, trying to gain control over a thoroughly compromised and captured agency like HHS and FDA and CDC and the NIH are. This is difficult. But again, I just read an article that the FDA is pulling their approval for a drug for Duchenne muscular dystrophy after 3 deaths. I mean, the COVID injection, early on, according to VAERS, there were reports of thousands of deaths associated with that injection early on when it was being administered to elderly. More than 40% of those deaths were occurring on the day of vaccination or within 1 or 2 days. Now, I realize VAERS doesn't prove causation, but man, that's a correlation you ought to be exploring, and we never did. Worldwide now we're approaching 40,000 deaths. I think something over 38,000. About a quarter of those deaths associated with the COVID injection report on VAERS occur on the day of vaccination within 1 or 2 days. And the fact that they're approving this platform, this mRNA platform, on an ongoing basis, I think is pretty outrageous. That they did it behind the back of RFK Jr., also outrageous. So again, I don't have an explanation for that either, but I am giving those individuals harmed by the COVID injection and also families harmed by childhood vaccinations, which happens, okay? It's a reality. It's the truth. There's nobody can dispute it, but they don't want to face it. They don't want to admit to it. Certainly the big pharma wants to cover it all up. But that hearing last week, I mean, it's heartbreaking among all the excellent testimony, and it's hard to listen to. I think in the video that CHD prepared for our hearing, that there was one mom early on talking about how her child who died of SIDS, okay, that was the diagnosis, SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, goes to a support group, and every parent who had its child died from SIDS, okay, sudden infant death syndrome, they're all talking about vaccines. They all had a instance where their child died of SIDS, but like the day before they were vaccinated. And the medical profession simply won't own up to it. So again, we have turned a blind eye toward this. In an earlier hearing, Dr. Joe Walscock, injured by the COVID injection, when I asked him, how do people like him feel? And his one-word answer was abandoned. And that's true of people whose child was perfectly normal, get injection, fever, seizures, all of a sudden they're autistic, they never speak another word. Again, this has to be explored. This has to be researched with integrity. That hasn't happened.
Senator, I know you're trying to lead in these spaces, which is why we were happy to have you on and why you were willing to come on. So please keep doing that. If there's anything we can do to help, let us know. And God bless. Thank you.
Well, thanks for publicizing. These people just want to be seen, heard, and believed so they can get help.
Amen. Thank you, Ron. Appreciate
Take care.
it. Reaction, gentlemen, to that conversation.
I hope the people of Wisconsin know how lucky they are, Steve. You and I woke up in the time where the nightly news came on. You just asked Senator Ron Johnson about not one, not two, not three issues that are Watergate level issues that would dominate all of the nightly news. And here he is trying to do three. Insane.
And his answer on a lot of fronts was, I'm trying to find out, and I don't know. What's the benign, innocent explanation for that?
None.
There isn't one. Hour 2 is next. All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace here with Aaron McIntyre, Todd Erzin, and all of you. And you can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox by emailing us steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Please don't forget to subscribe to our new YouTube channel, at Deace Show on YouTube. That's at Deace Show on YouTube. And then also, if you listen to the podcast version, thank you. You guys are the biggest part of our program's audience. If you haven't subscribed yet, click that button, please, on your podcast platform. You can also, if it's iTunes, Apple, you click subscribe, or instead of subscribe, you click follow instead. Thanks to all of you that have done those things for us. And please leave us a 5-star review as well. Tens of thousands of you have done that for the program. We appreciate each and every single one. So thank you for each of those too. And this part of the show brought to you by our friends over at Select Quote. Time for some life talk, life insurance talk, that is. You probably have it, but do you know how much you're paying for it? And for how much are you being covered? Odds are you pay too much for too little. And did you know that if you receive life insurance through your job and you're unexpectedly laid off, you could suddenly be covered for nothing? Scary to think about, but simple to get right thanks to Select Quote, which is where I'm headed to sort out my life insurance policy today, which is why I recommend you do the exact same thing. Most of us are numb to it now, but, listen, a lot has changed. A lot of geopolitical changes, disrupting century-old institutions, alliances, disruptions. I mean, this is what we voted for. All right, we wanted those disruptions, but those do come with some collateral damage as well. That's why you may want to look into finding new life insurance policy from SelectQuote. For over 40 years, SelectQuote has been one of the most trusted brokers in insurance, helping more than 2 million Americans secure over $700 billion with a B, $700 billion in coverage. And their mission is simple: to find out and to find you the right insurance policy for your unique needs. So they shop and then you save. Unlike other one-size-fits-all life insurance companies, SelectQuote's licensed agents, they work for you, and they do so in as little as 15 minutes. They'll compare policies from top-rated carriers to find you the best fit for your health and your budget, and they work for you for free. So get the right life insurance for you for less and save more than 50% at SelectQuote.com/Steve. That's SelectQuote.com/Steve. All right, I actually think the conversation we just had with Ron Johnson is a great segue to what we're going to do next for fake news or not. All right, so yesterday marked 6 months for Trump version 2.0 in the White House. And I thought I'd lay out some grades of how I think the president and his administration have performed on multiple fronts over the course of the first 6 months. All right, and as we go through this, I'll not only just tell you the grade and explain why, but I'm also going to give you guys a reason why I kind of chose these categories. And hey, you can do your own grades, do your own categories, right? But just so you guys can understand where I'm coming from and why I did what I did. So let's start with the areas that are, to me, A pluses. And I think the performance has been so strong, they're kind of self-explanatory. I think overall, the messaging has been an A plus from this administration. And that was at times among my biggest frustrations with the first Trump administration. Not that people like Sarah Huckabee are not excellent communicators. You know, a bunch of us just in Iowa just a couple weeks ago saw firsthand that they are, and that she is. Is the White House itself on message, right? Is it and I think back to just how disjointed all those coronavirus task force meetings that were held day after day after day in press conferences, as an example. So, you can put Billy Shakespeare up there, all right? And with a hint of Walter Winchell and Wolfman Jack, okay? And if the message doesn't resonate and doesn't connect, it doesn't matter who's saying it or how. And so I that was a great frustration. They would just be off message, just kind of just on rabbit trails and easily distracted, and, let's just carry out a grudge with Jim Acosta for 3 days, who I admit is a detestable person, but also will never be on a ballot. And no one's ever going to go to a polling booth and determine how they're going to vote based on their thoughts on Jim Acosta. So why are we wasting any level of political energy on this whatsoever? There just hasn't been those kinds of rake steps for the most part the first 6 months. And you're not going to bat 1,000. This is the presidency. Hardest job in the history of our species, okay? So you're not going to be perfect. But on a day-to-day basis, I don't even sweat it now. I'm not even nervous of what the messaging's going to be. I've become that level of confident in it. So I give them an A+ overall for the messaging of this White House comprehensively over the first 6 months. Gentlemen, your thoughts, fake news or not?
That is not fake news. The weird thing about the first term is Trump would go online and he'd say anything he wanted to, but it seems like the rest of the White House apparatus wasn't given the permission to deal with the enemy the way they needed to. Now he's empowered everybody. We're not going to try to be too nice. There's no rising above it. This needs to be defeated. It's Thunderdome. I agree.
Yep, not fake news. This has been, whether it's Caroline Leavitt, whether it's J.D. Vance, those are the two primary ones. But I just want to reiterate, early on in this administration, the second Trump administration, and really that's carried on to this day, there has been unanimity in messaging. You're not getting one message from one person, one message from one department, one message from the president, one message from the
right.
You're not getting all of that. So that is not an easy fix at all, or that's not an easy thing to accomplish at all. And they've done an excellent job at that across the board. And I just attribute it to it's not as if it's some sort of technocratic finagling or anything like that. I just think everybody that's involved with this administration knows what they want to accomplish, knows what the president wants to accomplish, and knows what they're in for. They know at this time, where they didn't in the last administration. And I think that kind of spells out why they have been so successful in messaging.
You mentioned Vance there, Aaron. If we didn't have what was going on, and it's still kind of going on, frankly, with the bait and switch on the Epstein story, if we didn't have that, we probably would have done an entire show on the speech that Vance gave at the Claremont Institute about 2 weeks ago. Because, I mean, that speech was, that was a banger. But something tells me that's probably not the only kind of speech with that level of vision casting the vice president's going to probably communicate in the next few years. So we'll have other chances. But that's just an example of what you're talking about. All right, my next A+. These are going to go in the order of my grading. I'm going to give an A+ for border security. If you look at the border situation compared to what they inherited, that's the way I'm looking at it, as a 1-to-1. Now, the deportation issue, we're going to get to that in a little bit. I think that should be given a carve-out as an issue, and I'll explain why, and why I don't have other issues necessarily as a carve-out, as a singular carve-out. But for border security overall, compared to where things were when they took over to now, I just think the numbers speak for themselves. What's been cut down at the border, the amount of illegal crossings, etc. A+ is what I give them for that. Fake news or not?
Not. I mean, Tom Homan is the real deal. He should be the model for whoever's running any agency. He's just deadly serious and don't get in my way. And I just saw a statistic a couple days ago, like San Diego, it's illegal immigration is down like 400%. That's all you need to know.
Yep.
Yeah, border security, like actually tightening up the border, absolutely an A+. You can squibble about actual deportations, but then again, big beautiful bill increased the budget for immigration and customs enforcement, so I would expect those deportation numbers to shoot up in the near term.
All right, let's go to the next category then that I've graded here. Foreign policy overall, I gave it an A. The only reason I did not give it an A+ is I just don't care about Ukraine. Now, I anticipated when all the talk from Lindsey Graham about escalating the arms for Ukraine, including offensive weapons, when he was having a wargasm the other night, I anticipated when we got on the air the next day, I was going to vent a spleen about this. But I didn't, because the president actually found a kind of clever way to do this. He didn't sell any arms to Ukraine. He sold them to NATO, and then NATO had to determine what they were going to do to them, and NATO chose to give them to Ukraine. So that to me is a little bit like Kirk breaking into Starfleet Academy to reprogram the Kobayashi Maru. All right, it's a little it's also a bit of a bait and switch, but it's actually one I appreciate the cleverness, because you know why? Because it's a nod to people like me and people in his base that believe me, if Trump was not aware or did not care that much of his base doesn't give a flying flip about Ukraine, he would have he'd have hand-delivered all those weapons to Zelensky himself and then said to Putin, I'm only doing this because you won't come to the table. He would have made it a leverage play. But the fact, after all this buildup from Lindsey Graham, and all we got the next day was, we just sold a bunch of arms to NATO, and they bought them. And they're welcome to give them Ukraine if they want, but that's their decision, okay, is an indication that he is sensitive to what people like us think about this. All right, so I will give some level of mercy in my grading for that level of cleverness and acknowledgement, because overall, and we saw this in Trump 1.0, foreign policy was the strongest part of his administration, and it had the longest lasting consequences after he was put out of office by whatever the 2020 election was. So the only reason it's not an A+, I just don't care about Ukraine. I mean, I'd be fine just completely walking away. We got our own problems and telling Europe, you guys, it's your pissing contest. It's your Habsburg dynasty fight. You all figure it out. I don't care. I don't think he's going to do that, but this is certainly better than every week waking up with how many billions more did we give Zelensky again this week? We're not doing that, at least.
So I'm an A- is still really good. Okay, I'm more of an A-. So I'm saying fake news, but only by a smidge, because going on that Middle Eastern tour and just giving a different American Middle East foreign policy a chance, and the reception that he received in most of those countries, most notably Saudi Arabia, I think that's good. And I think overall, the Trump foreign policy from his first term has been carried over into the second term. I still wasn't super jazzed about striking Iran, but having said that, I mean, I've said it multiple times on this show, blown away by what our armed forces pulled off in that strike. Do not care about Ukraine. Don't know why we're still concerning ourselves with that. I mean, is NATO increasing their funding or not?
Right.
That's what they have been claiming that they're doing and that they're taking care of their own. That's good. That's good for them. That's good for us. They need to have more skin in the game, but I don't know why we still need to be involved with that conflict. So I'm at an A-, but an A- is still really good.
All right. Todd?
Yeah, and I can see why you like it in that Trump is being pretty nimble. As you said before, Steve, this world is just too complicated to be locked into any one dogma on foreign policy. And the fact that he's a few weeks ago helped Israel in terms of the bombing, but a couple weeks later he was actually criticizing Bibi, and we've seen what's going on there with Huckabee as his ambassador. The same with Putin. He's been very skeptical of that war, but he's been smacking around Putin when he thought he needs to. So which is really important in this world. If you start making other nations' policies your dogma, then you're not the president of the United States anymore. And he doesn't. He's like, I can help you in this moment, but it's trust from verify tomorrow, and that's really important.
Domestic policy. So for now, I put the economy and everything into this bucket. Okay. That may not now, but now that we've had the one big beautiful bill and the executive order, we had executive order season, we had one big beautiful bill season. If I did this 6 months from now, I would probably go ahead and give the economy come January its own category now. Okay, as a breakout. But because it was basically all of that was included in getting past the one big beautiful bill, they essentially tried to get as many domestic policy initiatives done through Trump's executive orders that he came out of the gate with and the one big beautiful bill as they possibly could. Okay. So for now, I'm going to grade them on the basis of how they pursued them, which is comprehensively as a block. So I give it a B. I'm going to ding them for continually surrendering to the courts. We just had this again just this week or yesterday, in fact, on defunding Planned Parenthood. One federal judge in Boston thinks he can issue a universal injunction again, apparently, when the Supreme Court already said you can't do stuff like that. So here we are. But I also think I'm going to give him a little mercy here for the state of play in Congress, given how feckless that body is. And it's very clear that at the very least, the best you could say about Jerome Powell, if we're giving him the most fairness, is he just fundamentally disagrees with the president's economic agenda and is no ally, therefore, in deploying it. I think that's the best you could say. He's just not of one mind with the president of the United States on economic policy and just ideologically isn't an ally. I think that's the best case scenario, and everything after that gets progressively worse. Okay? So given the fecklessness of Congress, given the lack of cooperation from the Federal Reserve, I give them a little mercy to kind of counterbalance dinging them for the continual surrender to the courts. I give it a B overall for now. Fake news or not?
That's not fake news. I mean, so much work had to be done to overcome so much. And as big as the gap was on something like the border, you know, this gap in terms of the number of variables we're actually talking about may be the biggest one. So while there's certainly a lot of room to work going forward, how far we've come, this may be deserve the greatest A in terms of how much gap it's closed on the number of fronts. Mm-hmm. So I've certainly got no quarrel with you giving it a B at the very least.
Yeah, I was trying to do the math in my head, maybe to try to bump this to an A-, but I think this is not fake news. In the math that I was doing in my head is, would we all like to live in a country where the judiciary functions as it was designed? Where the executive branch is not put in a position where it has to continually break from the judiciary? Because in good faith, the compact is hey, we're just interpreting the Constitution here, which is what the job of the judiciary is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to live in that country, but all roads lead back to, these judges all across the country have beclowned themselves. They have absolutely nuked what credibility they had left, to the point that even John Roberts is like, we got to rein this in a little bit here a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to do all that math in my head. Are they trying to play this game where we don't completely blow up the court system? But I don't know where and how you get back to a judiciary that can be respected until you absolutely depant them and ignore them. So that's where I'm coming at. And so all those things taken together, I'm at a B as well. Kind of a high B.
All right. We've got 2 categories left, and obviously that means the grades are going lower. We'll get to those in a second after we talk about our friends over at Constitution Wealth. We've got 2 questions for you. Have you considered how your investments might unknowingly be funding values that are anathema to your own? And then number 2, are your hard-earned investment dollars being used to oppose the administration and the president you just voted for, likely in the last election? If you answered yes to one or both of those questions, you need to contact our friends over at Constitution Wealth. They can specifically screen investments to make sure they align with your values, especially your Christian values, ensuring your money supports businesses that honor God and instead of the spirit of the age. So don't let your wealth unknowingly fund causes that oppose the laws of nature and nature's God. Take control of your biblical mandate to be a good steward of your resources. All right. And no obligation today. Just get a free consultation to get started at constitutionwealth.com/blaze. Get started with a free consultation there. constitutionwealth.com/blaze. And remember, Constitution Wealth is a registered investment advisor. You should review their disclosures at constitutionwealth.com to understand their services and fees, and that all investing involves risk, including the risk of loss. I am a client of the firm. This is a paid endorsement, but my opinions are my own. All right. Final 2 categories. Let's get to deportations. For the first 6 months, I gave this a carve-out because I believe it's arguably the biggest need that the administration was elected to fill. It gets its own category because of that. And while we're ahead of Trump's first-term pace, we're still behind Obama's pace. And to me, that just isn't going to cut it. We just have too many people still on the homeland that just frankly do not belong here. And we have a window to take advantage of the momentum we have to get rid of them and send them back home, because this isn't their home, it's ours. And we have a window here to get rid of them and reclaim the integrity of our homeland, but that window will not exist into perpetuity. So I just think there are just too many people here that are still not gone. Maybe you want to give them some grace that the resources haven't been there, and that was supposedly one of the big selling points of the big beautiful bill. Well, we've got another 6 months to demonstrate that was true and improve this grade. Okay. But the only reason I didn't give them a failing grade, frankly, is because the courts are, even if they were to ignore them, there is still a bureaucratic hassle with the courts every time they try to act on this front, which is why I didn't just flat out fail them. All right. So I gave them some grace for the fact the courts are trying to act like the Immigration and Naturalization Service. Okay. But overall, given that this was probably the number one issue that they were elected to do something about, I just think the performance has been underwhelming overall. Fake news or not?
I would say that's a little bit of fake news because of the resources in that big, beautiful bill. What, now third in the entire world? Only 2, like, what was it, militaries? I don't remember the exact statistic, but it's just a giant, it's its own military now in many respects. And without that, early on, they perhaps did as much as they can, not only from a resource perspective, but an optics perspective, saying, hey, okay, it's one thing. We're used to people saying we want a lot of things, but then you're showed a video of some poor person, getting detained and instantly you're nowhere to be found. They went ahead and did this and didn't seem too worried about that, and the American people aren't worried about it either. I really think so far I'd give this something closer to a B, because I think they've done about as much as they could possibly probably do under the circumstances to test the realities of the situation.
Okay.
I'm not making excuses, but the Obama administration didn't have to deal with Maryland man hoaxes, one after the other, because they had a friendly media environment. So comparing the Obama deportation program to Trump,
right.
you have to look at the context. And again, I'm just trying to articulate what I believe the reality to be, not just trying to make excuses. So I do think you have to factor into this. This goes back to the messaging. Every single time, I can't think of an exception to this so far. Every single time the media has tried to do some sort of deportation hoax, where I think it was just a grandfather the other day. They were trying to, some Pennsylvania illegal. They tried to pull this the other day. It blew up in their faces. This goes back to their messaging. There needs to be more deportations. That's just a fact. And it has to speed up. And I'm hopeful that funding ICE to the hilt will do that. But so far, I would say, given the circumstances, as Todd just said, I'd say they're doing as good as they can do. Is that what's needed? No. But I think so far they're doing as well as they can do. So as well as they can do might be a B- or C. So I don't know what that is. Maybe slightly fake news.
Okay. Final category, accountability. I gave it a C. Although I have to tell you, after the Ron Johnson interview we just had, I might call myself fake news. All right? But let me give you the rationale for why I graded it the way that I did before we just talked to Senator Johnson. Clearly, there are better hires and management of the weaponized agencies. Thus, we're no longer being targeted as we were. And places like public health and DOD are way more transparent, for example. Okay. I also appreciate the pardons for the J6ers. And the restoration of the toxic jab purged military, especially because the first time they were implementing that, it was not sufficient. And Pete Hegseth listened to his constituents and came forward and made it right. Right? So appreciate that. Nobody's been arrested yet. I mean, it just blows my mind. I mean, nobody has. No restoration of the FBI whistleblowers, at least one of them. I mean, even if we give, I can't speak to the rest of them. I just know Steve Friend. I don't know the rest of them. All right, so maybe one of them then has some issues in his personnel file that came up that would not make it fine. But all of them? All of them. All of them aren't worthy of reinstatement. I'm sorry, but that's just inexcusable. First of all, at a very basic level, it's a dude code violation because one of the reasons why people like Kash Patel has the job as FBI director is those guys came forward and risked their own careers to tell the truth. So, I mean, there's just a dude code element to this fundamentally before we get to anything else. It's just inexcusable to me. The ongoing Epstein debacle that cannot be ignored. I mean, okay, so we're going to go talk to Ghislaine Maxwell. Great. Why couldn't that have been done in February, March, April? Now we're going to subpoena Ghislaine Maxwell. Great. Why couldn't that have been done in February, March, April? But to then hear Senator Johnson say, I have to send, quote, friendly subpoenas, which I don't even know what that is. I think that was his attempt to not come across as too condemning of his own team. Okay. Friendly subpoenas to Kash Patel to get answers on the assassination of the president. And given there is a significant chunk of our audience that is voting Trump and has become MAGA because of a systemic distrust of the system. And the idea that Trump is the kind of disruptor that will go in there and expose things. And we've been operating under the assumption the reason they've tried to bankrupt the guy, imprison the guy, and then kill the guy is because they thought that too. Okay. But to be sitting here and to have a U.S. senator on our own side say he has to subpoena the FBI director in his own party to get answers on multiple assassination attempts of the president of the same party. I just don't know what the possible benign, innocent explanation for that is. I just don't. And I don't know how. I had to actually fight to not give this an F. And to do that, I had to remember back in January when they gave the pardons out, when they began the process of restoring the thousands of military personnel that wrongly were purged because of the toxic genetic serums. Okay, so to me, this is the most benefit of the doubt I could give by only giving them a C on accountability. But I'm beginning to think I might be fake news or not myself after the interview we just did. What do you guys think?
Yeah, you are. Should have not been above a D.
The only saving grace, and I mean only saving grace on this category, is the military. I have to think. Yes, there's better management in the three-letter agencies. Pete Hegseth, I mean, it was just, they just removed a general or commander, I can't remember, of a ship who okayed, drag performances, renaming the USNS Harvey Milk. There has been some accountability in the military, definitely changes of policy in the military, but overall making examples, it's hard to not come up pretty well empty. Empty in like a consequential sense. I'm sure there have been people who have, James Comey's daughter just got fired. Why that happened in July and not January in the Southern District of New York, which is apparently just a judicial black hole. I don't know. But this one has been probably the most disappointing so far. And what's probably the most frustrating, at least from my vantage point, is that there's no, if I really try to put on my benefit of the doubt hat, I just come up empty. I can't explain why the accountability is taking so long. I just can't explain it. It's unexplainable, and therefore it's the most frustrating and inexcusable, especially when it comes to the DOJ and FBI.
Just looking at it just from a nuts and bolts standpoint politically, we didn't really have a major domestic policy fight except for one budget reconciliation until Big Beautiful Bill over July 4th weekend. So, there's 6 months there where you can say, hey, we're going to get this done, stuff out there, clear the air so that we can then focus on policy late in the year. Later in the year. You see what I'm saying? So it just strategically, nuts and bolts, I can't come up with a rationale for why there just hasn't been a massive amount of disclosure on these fronts. I can't. Pop Culture Tuesday's next. Trying to make real estate markets not necessarily even great again at this point. How about exist again? Let's just start there. Okay. So in these, for the first time in the new space, unprecedented times.
Bing.
Yeah, we still work. It still works. Make sure before you attempt to make real estate markets exist again where you live or you want to live, make sure that you've got an agent you can trust to help you get there, and you're going to find them where the name says it all. realestateagentsitrust.com. realestateagentsitrust.com. You go there, you'll get connected with top performing agents who actually care about your outcome. A lot of times you share values with them, a lot of times from the same Blaze audience that you're a part of. Their track records of success have been verified, otherwise we wouldn't recommend them to you. So whether you're moving across the country or across town, these are the kinds of agents we'd hire ourselves that you'd recommend to the people that you care about as well. Get started with one of them today that can make sure you get to what can be, even in the best of times, a stressful experience. You get the best outcomes and practices at realestateagentsitrust.com. Head over there right now. Again, that's realestateagentsitrust.com. All right, we ready for some Pop Culture Tuesday?
You bet.
So we said at the start of July that this month was going to go a long way in determining what was really the future of a lot of prominent IPs within the pop culture lexicon. And three of them were all attempting now to resurrect their brands and themselves, all in the month of July. All right. Jurassic World doing its own rebirth with Scarlett Johansson. Superman under the guise of James Gunn. This week, it'll be Fantastic Four. So we've done the first two. And just dinosaurs in summertime, man. I at this point, I just don't. You could probably the latest Jurassic Park movie is largely empty calories and a nothing burger, but dinosaurs in summertime, I just kind of feel like they could just kind of just keep making those movies forever. The audience score isn't great, the reviews aren't great. That movie is still going to make well over 300 million north of 300 million domestic. All right, so. I mean, Universal can probably just keep making Jurassic. We might be in a second ice age before Universal decides people just don't want to watch these movies anymore. All right. So I saw the movie, not a great movie. Okay. But I mean, I think that brand is just really strong. The other two brands were in much more treacherous territory. And they also didn't have the boost of the July 4th weekend to open up with that Jurassic Park and Jurassic World had already claimed. So they're trying to do it in lesser financially successful windows and in the shadows of each other now. All right. So the sandwich movie here is Superman because you have Fantastic Four is going to come out this week. So the box office for Superman, it has been very fascinating to watch. First of all, this is the highest audience scored Superman movie ever at Rotten Tomatoes. Now, as someone that has seen the Christopher Reeve original over 230 times, I find that to be absolute sacrilege, but it is true. The audience score for the Christopher Reeve Superman film is about 88%, and the audience score for this film is about 93%. So it's the highest audience. It's way higher than the audience score for Man of Steel. This is the highest scored Superman film, Rotten Tomatoes, Superman 2. I think its audience score is like 77%, which is weird because actually this movie is very similar in many respects in terms of the way that it starts out and its overall vibe to Superman 2. But the audience score is very high. The critic score is very high. The domestic box office has been very strong. It is very likely Fantastic Four is going to really have to probably overperform to end up grossing more money than Superman will this year. It's probably going to end up being the number one comic book movie. It's going to go easily north of 300 million, finish in the top 5. It's at 240 some odd million within only 15 days of release. No, not even 50. Yeah, no, when it came out on the 11th. Today's the 22nd, so 12 days of release. 12 days of release, it's sitting at north of 240 million. The other thing about Superman that's interesting is its weekdays. It had the highest Monday box office, the highest Tuesday box office, and the highest Wednesday box office of any films this year, including Minecraft, which is going to end up making way more money than Superman. Including Minecraft and Lilo and Stitch, which will both make more money than Superman. So for whatever reason, it did very well in weekday audiences last week. And the reviews are strong. It's very clear that Warner Brothers, now I think Superman has been aided by how strong Sinners has performed and how strong Warner Brothers' overall release schedule has. It's taken a lot of the pressure off. At this time, at the beginning of the year, a lot of people thought maybe all of Warner Brothers was riding on Superman's success, but they have actually had a phenomenal first half of 2025. And so that took some of the pressure off of Superman, and it's very clear Warner Brothers is totally invested. The management, they're great. They're moving on. They've given James Gunn a blank check to go out there and build himself a wider universe. So from a Warner Brothers perspective and their investors' perspective, mission was accomplished. From the audience perspective, and the audience score in the box office, mission was accomplished. Now, internationally, the film is underperforming. And so there's a lot of discussion about why that is. One of the popular theories, which I happen to actually agree with to an extent, is that Superman is considered a uniquely American symbol, and we're in a very disruptive moment right now with a lot of global partners, and not to mention China, and that's the number 2 movie market in the world. And so, this is not necessarily a time where we're buying the world a Coke, so to speak. I think there may be something to that. It's probably going to need the international market to end up making the 700-800 million globally that Warner Brothers was hoping. But the movie is already financially successful, and you have to keep in mind that it also is competing against itself with PVOD windows and streaming windows that just didn't exist in the past. So I would say that it did not hit top-end expectations, but it certainly has done very well and good enough that Warner Brothers is satisfied, and they're going to hand James Gunn the keys to the kingdom moving forward. which brings us then to the worldview of the film and what that may mean going forward. I think no other character is open to this level of worldview projection on every side as Superman because of the altruistic nature of his character. And when you're in a culture where the social compact is broken and a symbol of unity and altruism is brought to you, I think it's undeniably impossible not to project what is happening in the culture upon that character, because he's meant to be and was created to be two things: the very kind of symbol in Americana that a lot of us cherish. But I know some of you don't want to believe this, and I'm sorry that it doesn't fit your narrative, but it was created to be an immigrant story. That is absolutely true. That's not a woke thing. That's an absolute truth. It is true. It was created by the sons of first-generation Jewish immigrants who felt the tension of whether or not they were actually wanted by a culture they desperately wanted to assimilate to. And so they really believed that one way to win over their new countrymen was with excellence. So let's create an altruistic, messianic hero with a mosaic storyline. And that was the immigrant experience that that was the 20th century immigrant experience. How can we assimilate into a country that may or may not want us? I understand that is not the immigrant experience of the 21st century. The immigrant experience of the 21st century is we all get replaced for wrong think and wrong vote. But the original source material is that immigrant story. That is part of the fabric of Superman's story. And no one was offended by that 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Why? Well, we weren't in the midst of trying to replace masses of the population via illegal immigration 30, 40, 50 years ago like we are right now. So I can understand why that is stigmatized, but it is part of the source material. What I think is more fascinating moving forward, and I think is rife for worldview debate. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the film. 3, 2, 1. So I know a lot of you, because of the Richard Donner iconic film, think that it's always been the case that Superman was sent here by his parents on like a pseudo-messianic mission. And by the way, previous generations of Christians were kind of offended at that. There was criticism for playing that stuff up in the past, that it was kind of idolatrous to play it up in the past for a secular superhero to be using New Testament language and imagery as heavy-handed as both Zack Snyder. I mean, at one scene in Man of Steel, when Jor-El, Russell Crowe says, you can save them all. And he falls out of Zod's ship like Christ on the cross with his arms stretched out wide. Okay, I mean, that's, pretty obvious imagery, all right? In Richard Donner's film, he quotes directly from the New Testament in Marlon Brando's Jor-El talking to Kal-El, all right? So while we are kind of yearning for that, previous generations thought maybe that's going a little too far and we're borderline idolatrous in the other direction. So it is what it is. But it is not always the case that in Superman's origin, his parents have wanted great things for the planet Earth. In fact, in one of the longest running depictions of Superman, the TV show Smallville that went on for 10 years, originally in Smallville, Zod sent his son Kal-El here to rule and conquer the planet. So this is not something that James Gunn just kind of concocted. It's happened at times throughout the Superman lore, but it is not the Superman lore that people are accustomed to, and this is what has caused the most division and revolt. And I can understand why, okay? I can understand the timing of getting rid of some of the messianic imagery and iconography, a godlike voice has an only begotten son that he sends here to save us. I can understand why getting rid of that imagery, much of it now, is problematic for people. Like Joel Berry, we got asked about him yesterday over at the Babylon Bee. He was very, very critical of that. And I've seen other people on our side be very, very critical of that. Again, it's art, it's subjective, and they are messing with a lot of the most cherished parts of his origin. So I'm not here to defend that. But what I do think is you could look at it from the other perspective if you've seen the film. Because I used a term a minute ago, replacement theory, right? Well, in the film, Superman's parents urge him to engage in replacement theory. This happened in Man of Steel. What does Zod want to do? Replace humanity, terraform Earth, replacement theory. Superman rejects it. In this film, Superman's parents urge him to engage in replacement theory. Krypton will be reborn through you. His mom even says, take lots of wives, do as much breeding as you possibly can, right? And take over and rule. You're the superior being. In this film, he rejects replacement theory and instead fully embraces the values from his Earth parents, who are the quintessential elderly Midwestern. I've never heard people don't talk like that. I don't know. I live in Iowa here. I go all kinds of places. People talk and live like that. I don't think they were treated as bumpkins or anything at all. I mean, should we just not have Southerners with an accent? Should we just not have Californians with beach lingo? I actually thought it was very endearing. And he adopts their values wholeheartedly. And in fact, what ends up happening at the end of the film, so the film starts out where Superman is injured. Just the opening scene in the trailer where you see him launched into the snow. He's lost his first fight and he's injured. He has to go back to the Fortress of Solitude and essentially get like a sun injection to heal up, all right? And in order to soothe him, his robots, which are right out of the comics, they end up playing for him his message from home, which he only has a part of because the rest of it was lost. He thinks it was lost in the journey. And the part that has from home has all that messianic language in it that he was sent here for a reason. And he's like, and that, so I'm basically on a mission from God. And then Lex Luthor ends up sneaking into the Fortress of Solitude and finds out that there's more to the message. And the message is replacement theory. That is what Superman's parents sent him here to do. So it is an immigrant story, and it was replacement theory. So right away, they're admitting people immigrants do come here with bad motives. Right away, they're admitting replacement theory is an actual thing. And what happens at the end? Superman utterly rejects it, fully immerses himself into the assimilation as a human being and an American, fully adopts the values of his red state nuclear family from Kansas, and he ends up replacing the message of the family that wanted him to do replacement theory. And at the end of the film, when he goes now to heal up at the Fortress of Solitude, the messages and stuff that have been swapped out are now actually the visions of his childhood with his mom and his dad on Earth. Learning to ride a bike, learning to play catch, pretending to fly, pretending to be a superhero, right? So I kind of find that to be fascinating. And I think you could take it either way you want to take that. Joel could be right. I could be right. I think it's entirely subjective. But given where we are as a society, that the social compact is broken, and none of these people deserve any of your benefit of the doubt. So I'm not here to argue whatsoever. You can take whatever position on this you want. But what I am telling you is that Superman's Kryptonian family told him to illegally come to America and engage in replacement theory. Flat out told him to do this. And he rejected it and chooses assimilation and the values that he learned from his nuclear family, red state in Kansas instead. I happen to think that's a message we could easily rally around, but I can see why other people might have a different interpretation, and that is the subjectivism of art. Overall, though, the film doesn't really have, the film does not have a lot of, I would call them iconic moments. It has a lot of fun moments. It's a fun movie. It's a flawed movie, particularly the first act. It gets much better as the movie goes on. It's the most comic accurate depiction of Lex Luthor we've ever seen, and the dynamic between him and Superman we've ever seen. And to me, there's one line in the film, though, that both times I saw it choked me up. And Lois is lecturing Superman that he's too idealistic and needs to be more cynical. And and the bands he likes, he thinks are punk rock, are really just, bubblegum pop, and he has to stop believing and hoping for the best in people. And he looks at her and he says, maybe that's the new punk rock. And that line made me stand up in my seat both times. So not a perfect film, a fun film. I thought they actually tried to make the film as the least offensive they possibly could, frankly. Okay. I really love what they did with Jimmy Olsen. That's very clever. I won't spoil that. I do love the idea that Lex Luthor has a bunch of bots that are monkeys that do nothing but just poop post to Superman on X all day. I thought that was kind of funny and probably a dig at to Zack Snyder's cult. But it's a fun movie. It doesn't have the iconography of the first film. It's not as good as Man of Steel, but it's fun. And I didn't find it the least bit offensive, really, at all. So those are my thoughts. I know we're close to out of time. You guys have anything you want to say before we get out of here?
Well, I haven't seen it. Aaron, have you seen it?
I have not. I know that's going to come as a surprise to absolutely no one.
In this case, Aaron actually has been leaving his house to come here and build us a new studio, so he has an excuse. Okay. It's not because he's just a shut-in. He'll get back to that, though, soon. Yes.
I guess the best that I've seen that it for, kids go out, not be brainwashed by this. It seems like, but it's not doing anything within the cultural conversation, like even just like Top Gun Maverick did.
I agree.
Like no one's really talking about this.
I agree. And I think probably that's on purpose. I think they were afraid that they could not possibly thread that needle, rightly or wrongly, so they didn't even try. They didn't even try. And they just said, let's just make an episode of a comic book into a movie and see if that is fun enough. And so far, the box office has said it is. Overtime is next for subscribers. For the rest of you, Romans 8:28.